Welcome in. It's Brad with College SportsCast, and we are presented by the Fanboys.
Jim, this is where I make fun of him because he's delayed. He still can't see it yet. And no, he still hasn't seen it yet. Told you this is the fun part. Oh, here we go. He's about to
see.
There it is.
It always lags for me whenever I do this. I don't know exactly what the deal is, but we are College SportsCast. We have a special guest on with us tonight. We have Jim Dunaway from the next round with us tonight. Hey, Jim, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Apparently, from the history of the show, you'll hear this one on Friday, but I'm doing great.
This is true.
Yes,
it does have a little bit of lag when I play that video.
Yeah. Are you in Alabama, or are you in a place that doesn't have high-speed internet like Arkansas? Where are you?
I'm in Kentucky, actually.
Kentucky. Okay, that's close.
Yeah.
I'm not TV in Kentucky. Did you know?
Yeah.
You did?
I did. I worked in Lexington, Kentucky for 2 years during the Rick Pitino years of Kentucky basketball. That was my job, was to travel around and be in Kentucky basketball. Yeah, the Patinos, Bombinos, and the 2 years they were not eligible for the NCAA tournament coming off probation, but where Pitino really built the legacy, the foundation of what Kentucky basketball would become under him was those 2 years. And it was a fun time there in Lexington. I learned a lot, and I learned that Kentucky basketball fans and Alabama football fans are a lot alike.
Yes.
They are exactly a lot alike. I agree with that 100%. I'm a diehard Kentucky fan, been in Kentucky all my life as far as born, raised, bred Kentucky fan. So, and then I actually moved to Alabama and lived in Gulf Shores for about 5.5 years. And so I know a lot of Alabama fans as well, and they are a whole lot alike. I agree with that statement 100%.
Yeah, the one thing I think you would find is that you have fan bases that feel like they should be contending not just for the SEC championship every year, but for a national championship every year. And sometimes it's, it can be hard being those fans because you look at other fan bases that find joy in that seems to be very simple enjoyment of the game, whether it's a win over a rival, an upset of a Kentucky or an Alabama football, and they just seem like it's the greatest thing in the world. And you never understand when you're one of those fans at Alabama or Kentucky that you're like, how come it's so easy for them to enjoy the sport, making it to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight and being happy about that. Kentucky fans would get upset whenever they would lose. And in football for Alabama, if you're not playing and winning a national championship, there's some kind of disappointment. We've lived that our whole lives as Alabama fans in this state, and I'm sure Kentucky basketball fans, especially recently under Calipari, feeling a little bit of the same way.
You're absolutely right. The last 3 seasons has been way off of Kentucky standards. It's not even close. So, you're right, Kentucky fans. I mean, we expect to be competing for a Final Four at the minimum, at least competing and getting close every single year. And we just haven't been able to be there the last 3, not even close the last 3 years.
Yeah, and that's got to be hard because it's been Alabama and Auburn football schools, if you will, that has sort of taken the place of Kentucky in basketball, and I can imagine how hard that is to swallow. But if you look through football history in the SEC too, there's been times when Alabama, spent the years between Gene Stallings and Nick Saban wandering in the wilderness, and eventually Kentucky basketball will be back, just like Alabama football always eventually comes back as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Calipari does have a great class coming in for next year, and there's a little bit of hope around now. Now that the season's over for us and stuff for next year, but we'll see. You never know when it comes to that kind of stuff. You got 5 freshmen that are 4 of them are McDonald's All-Americans. 5 of them are 5-star kids coming in, and they have a lot of talent, but they'll be young.
Yeah, they will be, and it's a talented group coming in. We're 6 minutes into the show. He makes fun of your internet connection, but John hasn't said a word in 6 minutes. I mean, we can lose his part of the screen here, and you and I can just talk if he's not going to add anything to the conversation.
Hey, right now you're talking about Kentucky over here to my left, and Bama over here to my right. And I will get my 2 cents in, but at this moment, I mean, you guys are just feeding off of each other, so I'm letting it go.
Well, I mean, are you going to talk about the Braves, or what are you going to talk about? I don't know what you're bringing to the table here.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, we had some breaking news while I was in studio today with you guys. We had an Alabama basketball transfer. Yes.
Namari Burnett, you mean?
Namari Burnett, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's going to Michigan, another blue blood school, basketball blue blood to basketball blue blood, Alabama to Michigan.
And I mean, I was just really going to kind of talk about just, the overall feeling of Alabama's season, since again, you being here in Birmingham and plugged into, a lot of SEC and Alabama.
I mean, it's tremendous disappointment when anytime you go in as a 1 seed, but especially the number 1 overall seed. I mean, the committee tells you're the number 1 overall seed. So if you don't win the national championship, then you did not live up to what the committee thought you were. So the fact that you're not playing this weekend in the Final Four is a disappointment. And for Alabama fans who have had nothing but unbelievable success over their lifetimes in football. In basketball, so many of them yearn for just one trip to the Final Four, not even a national championship, just a trip to the Final Four. And in this state, it's come very few and far between. Only Auburn has been, and they did that a few years ago. UAB started a basketball program in 1979, and by the early 80s, the first class of Gene Bartos at UAB was playing Louisville in the Elite 8 with a chance to go to the Final Four in like 3 years of the program's existence. And Alabama took to the 2000s before they got even to the Elite 8. And Auburn made it to the Elite 8 before Alabama did. So there is tremendous anticipation for that day to finally happen for Alabama. And everyone thought it was this year, that it was going to be this year, especially when the tournament started to unfold and everybody got upset. It just was laid out for Alabama.
I'll be honest with you, Jim. I fully kind of expected Alabama to be there this year as well. I was on board with the whole idea that Alabama probably had the best team this year. You was talking about the news of the transfer. So Brandon Miller also declared for the draft today as well.
Yeah, that's no surprise. Brandon Miller came in as a one-and-done guy. It'll be interesting to see who else leaves. And in this day and age of college basketball, some of our viewers on the next round talked about how they, if you hold 50% of your roster, you're doing good. I don't know how many people Alabama will change over, who's being asked to leave, who's being asked to stay. But Brandon Miller going to the NBA was never, ever in doubt. This was going to be a one-and-done situation from the get-go.
Absolutely.
He's a top 3 pick. And the bottom line, though, is Brandon Miller was the team's best player. They go 11 deep, but he was their best player, and he did not play his best basketball in the 3 tournament games. He was scoreless in the
Absolutely
first one.
not.
Yeah, very average in the second one, and in the third one, really 6 turnovers, didn't score a lot of big buckets, didn't hit any 3-pointers of value. So it was a disappointing tournament for Brandon Miller, and that sort of reflected how Alabama ended up.
Actually, talking about a disappointment for Brandon Miller, he actually has the poorest shooting percentage ever for somebody who had 40 or more shots in the NCAA tournament. He went 8 for 41, which is less than 20%. It's like 19 something. It's less than 20%. It's the worst shooting percentage ever for somebody who took 40 or more shots in the tournament.
Yeah, and you can add to that probably the worst shooting percentage of somebody who's ever been drafted in the top 3 of the NBA draft, because that's where he'll go. He has that kind of game. He'll be a lottery pick.
I expect him to be a top
Alabama
3. He may be a top.
Yeah, but for Alabama fans, that doesn't mean a whole lot because they wanted that tournament success. I don't think he'll go number 1 or number 2 overall because of the international players and the one in the G League, but he'll be the top college player taken in the draft, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I think for sure he'll be a top 3 draft pick.
Yeah,
I just don't see it being any different than that, really.
Right.
So let's talk about.
Go for it.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to move it over into spring football. Just what are you seeing with Alabama? We're just stay with Alabama right now with the team this year, quarterback situation. Moving forward to next season.
Well, that's really an interesting question when you start with quarterback. Nick Saban, a guy I've been around for a long, long time now, covering him and had a chance to host his show for many years. He occasionally will say words, phrases that are not the same thing he says every year. You can almost go back first practice in spring, 5th practice in spring, first scrimmage in the fall. You can go back and watch those news conferences over, the first 5, 10, 15 years, and they're almost verbatim the same phrasing and the same way he characterizes everything. But occasionally he will say things that is out of the norm for him. And he did that early this spring. And there are only 5 practices in of 15, but early in the spring, he said, I like everything around the quarterback position. So the quarterback position development will be huge for the team. But he talked about how much he liked everything around the quarterbacks. And in recent years, with Bryce Young and Tua Tagovailoa and the talent Mac Jones squeezed in between there, you've had such great quarterback play. You've watched the results on the field and you wondered, man, if the offensive line was a little better, if the running backs, the receivers were a little bit better, maybe this team could do this or that. Nick Saban seems to be very pleased with the other 21 players on the field. It's that development of the quarterback. And everything we keep hearing is it's Ty Simpson. And that actually started back in the middle of last year, even though Milroe was the guy they turned to when Bryce Young missed a game. Most everyone we talked to that we're close to believed that it was a situation that if it had been more than one game, if it had been 2, 3, or 4 games the rest of the season, if Bryce had been hurt that bad, that they would have instantly turned to Ty Simpson. But because it was a one-game situation, that Milroe, the game plan, the opponent they were playing, was designed more of a run pass option guy, that they could get a victory like they did with him at quarterback, as opposed to throwing a new Ty Simpson in there and sort of moving the program to the next era of quarterback. So Ty Simpson was impressive all last year in camp, especially the second half of the season. And it looks like he is the guy to beat as they work through the final 10 practices.
Okay. And they lost not just Young, they're going to lose Will Anderson as well, who was basically the heart and soul of the defense last year. Of course, Bama's got 5 stars galore everywhere. So I fully expect them just like everybody else does down in Alabama that we were talking about, to return to form.
Yeah, and that is true. I mean, you're losing another top 5 first-round draft pick in Will Anderson. But what Will did last year was, his stats were not the same. His wow plays were not the same as they were the year before. But that's because he was drawing so much attention on every game plan. I mean, he was a double team, triple team machine. People were focusing on Will Anderson. I was really surprised that Dallas Turner did not have a bigger year last year than he had, or some other players, Toa in them. So I'm excited to see what Dallas Turner does this year. I'm excited about some of the younger guys, and I'm really, really excited about who takes Toa's place in the middle, and some of the names you hear coming out. That could be an interesting position, because replacing Toa's brain will be hard. But I do think that he was slightly undersized, maybe a step slower to play that position at that level that they needed him to play. Brilliant brain, which helped Alabama defensively a lot. But if they can replace the brain, I think physically they'll have a better linebacking core, maybe sideline to sideline, than they did last year.
All right, so I'm going to join these two together just for a second between Alabama basketball and football. Okay? All right. So, and we'll go back to spring football and the rest of some teams and stuff here in a minute. But Nick Saban made a major statement right before Alabama's last basketball game, and basically come on and said, no, wrong place, wrong time. His comments, that's what everybody remembers hearing just about. And I just wondered your thoughts, and not just your thoughts, but do you think that it had did it change Alabama basketball's outcome? Did it affect the team, do you think?
I don't think it impacted the team. I think you're pretty weak if you start looking for excuses. If you're a player and you let outside noise like that impact your performance, that would be a weak excuse to me to say I didn't perform well because of what someone else says. I'm sure there are people that love to make excuses like that. Those people don't win championships. So
right, but
the players,
it was like the next day or 2 days later or something. So I just thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, the players said it did not impact them. I will tell you this: Nate Oates, when he made that statement, knew it was the wrong statement to make. Nate Oates,
it was definitely the wrong statement.
Apologized 2 days after that, after the South Carolina game, the first chance he was back in front of the microphone. He said, man, that was basically the wrong statement. I shouldn't have said that. Wrong place, wrong time was the wrong thing to say. For Nick Saban, that guy is so focused on everything he's talking about, and that's how he disciplines and teaches his players, is there's no such thing as the wrong place or wrong time. You got to be responsible for who you're surrounded by. But he makes those statements talking about his football program, his players, his discipline, the situation that he was dealing with when it comes to the arrest of Tony Mitchell, I believe it was Tony Mitchell, the player that was arrested in Florida. He was speaking specifically to that case with no implication or outside direction at Nate Oates. The thought that Nick Saban somehow was upset with Nate Oates for the way Nate Oates was handling his basketball program could not be further from the truth. Nick Saban this year came to more basketball games than he's ever come to. Most of those were after the preliminary hearing that mentioned Brandon Miller's part of that process that night. He showed up at the Kentucky game and the Arkansas game, not sitting in his seats, which are way away from the camera angles, but was sitting with Greg Byrne near the court, right next to the bench, where he could be on camera a lot, even walked onto the court to shake hands with John Calipari. If Nick Saban didn't like the way the thing was handled by Nate Oates or by Greg Byrne, he would have never put himself in the middle of that situation. He would have never have been the life raft for the program like he was by showing up at those games. So for a lot of the national media who tried to make that as a shot by Nick Saban at Nate Oates, they just don't show up and watch the way those two interact, and they don't show up and watch how Nick Saban came to the games when he usually doesn't come to the games. He's usually doing other things and doesn't come to a lot of basketball games. He was specifically at those games during that period of time to show his support for Nate Oates. There's no problem between those two guys.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was either, and I really agree with you. That's the way Nick Saban handles his program, his players, and I really think it was just him talking about his player and the Mitchell guy that was arrested. But I think a lot of the national media and a lot of the people just kind of ran with it because Nate Oates had said, wrong place, no wrong time with Brandon, and probably shouldn't have said that. But you know, but anyway, since you were coming on and you're close to the program, I wanted to bring it up and
Oh, it's
ask
no
you
problem
about
bringing it up.
it.
I know I had a wonderful time this summer. I had a chance, and a lot of your viewers and listeners may not know this, but I had a chance to host an event for the World Games where we were honoring all the big businesses that had contributed to the World Games in Birmingham. And the dinner was basically a 1 hour conversation on the stage with me hosting Nick Saban and Nate Oates. So I had a chance to hang out with the guys in the green room. They rode over together. They rode back to Tuscaloosa together. They were great friends, and we had a wonderful time that night where we talked about everything, really about both of them growing up, their childhoods, the things they were similar with each other, and their friendship's a lot stronger than a lot of people try to make it out to be.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one reason why I wanted to bring it up with you on our show and kind of talk about it, for us as well, because I know you have some insight and that other people don't have. So
No, absolutely. I don't mind the question at all. I just wanted to make sure that I gave you the opinion
yeah,
that I had there. I will
Right.
tell you this though. Are you asking if you had asked me, did the incident, the murder that happened in January, and everything that happened from that point, did it impact that basketball team? There's no way of telling, but it was a long season, and it was longer when you have off the court issues that are going on. It's a long basketball season anyway. I
Right.
mean, UAB plays tonight. They're 29-9, so yes, 38 games. So you're talking about you're playing
right,
38, 35, 38 games.
right.
When you it's a long season. You're together for a long, long time. And when you have that incident going on, it's a wear and tear on a basketball program when you're away from that, when you're away from just the X's and O's and the winning and losing, having to deal with that. So yeah, there is a chance that could weigh on a team over a
Yeah,
period of
and
time. But I
I
don't think
don't
Nick
really.
Saban's comments did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think throughout the season, John and I, and a few guests, we've talked about this incident, the murder incident that happened and everything. And during the season, I didn't really, I kept saying I haven't seen any signs that it really affected them on the court. Now, the way that they played in the tournament, did the wear and tear and everything of it, did that have an effect? I can't say that for sure for any reason whatsoever. But, it is a long season and there was a lot of stuff going on that they were having to deal
Yeah.
with.
Well, I mean, there are some facts. I mean, Jaden Bradley never regained his talent, but he also had a small injury to an arm that could have infected his shooting and such like that. So, but he was never the same player that he was at one point in the year. And he obviously was at the scene, according to testimony that night. So he was never the same. And Brandon was erratic down the stretch. He was more erratic after all this became public and he became a focal point than he was before that. So that's those
Right.
two things that you can just look at the stat sheet and say, all right, those two guys who were, mentioned in that preliminary hearing, they did not perform as consistently as they did before that.
Right.
Right.
Now,
I agree.
I'm getting ready to switch again. We're going to be end up switching, going back and forth between basketball and football. But we did have a football question where you were talking about quarterbacks and talking about that the plan, or that Ty Simpson was the one that seems to be kind of leading the race or ahead of the game right now. Talk about the new coordinator, Tommy Rees, and the job that he's got. The work that he's got cut out for him, and then just what kind of development or what you see in, or what Saban sees in Tommy Rees at Alabama.
Well, I think the best thing Tommy Rees brings to the table is the ability to get Alabama to the next level of their next chapter of a style of play. They were a team that grew from a very physical. Not that they were run only; they threw the ball a lot when AJ McCarron was the quarterback. They threw the ball a lot with Jake Coker, and that national championship year. But when you eventually got to Tua Tagovailoa and then to Bryce Young, between that Mac Jones, you had such a great receiving core and great quarterbacks that you get away from some of the DNA of what Nick Saban believes in. Enter Tommy Rees, who's a guy that's going to bring to the table, more of a tight end into it, maybe more of a physical running game. Still throw the football a whole lot because you have a talented quarterback and some talented players at the receiver position. But I think you will see a lot more of a running game and an offense that resembles more Jim McElwain than it does Lane Kiffin. It will be more Jim McElwain than, say, it was Steve Sarkisian. And for some Alabama fans, that'll take some getting used to. But if you remember what it was like in 2011 and 2012, you probably will like that. But they're not going to shy away from throwing the football. That's just what football is nowadays. But this team has struggled in recent years to line up a 3rd and 1 and just get a yard sometimes. And that wasn't the case in 2011, 2012, 2015 during those championship years. And they're going to get back to being able, if needed, to get a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1 situation. And they're going to build that in the character and the DNA. They're going to put that in the recipe and cook it up here this spring and have it ready to go next year. And that's what Tommy Rees brings to the table. He is more, as I said, Jim McElwain than he is more of the recent guys. And he's young, so he's a great recruiter. And to me, that's where Nick Saban always starts with his assistant coaches. You have to be great recruiters and then great on the field, but you got to be able to recruit first. And Rees is really good at that. He's not too far removed from the game. He's a really well-respected guy who develops quarterbacks. He's exactly what Ty Simpson would need being developed. And I don't know how many people know this or not, but when Rees was at Notre Dame, he was the main recruiter, wait for it, for Ty Simpson during his high school recruitment, trying to get him to come to Notre Dame to be the quarterback at Notre Dame. He spent a lot of time going to visit Ty Simpson, watching Ty Simpson's high school games, built a relationship with him. So he already has a pre-developed relationship with Ty Simpson, which is going to, sort of fast start their relationship.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep. And then in our chat here, we've got Anthony Weeks, who has asked the question, what do you think about Garrett Riley's offense and what he's going to install over at Clemson?
Well, I would say 2 things about Garrett Riley's offense or the hiring of him at Clemson. One, I would say, good for Dabo, because Dabo went outside of his immediate circle to try to make Clemson better, which is it's uncharacteristic of Dabo. And he's trying to, bring some fresh thoughts and blood into it. The other thing I would say, though, is Max Duggan the reason Garrett Riley looked so good last year, or was it really Garrett Riley's plays? How many times did Max Duggan go Braveheart and lead that TCU team to victory and just run through the enemy and try to lead TCU to victory? So Klubnik, I think, can do that. I think Klubnik's a better quarterback than Duggan is, but Duggan had a hell of a year last year, and he was able to make Garrett Riley look good. I mean, it looks fine and dandy that you got a Riley. Lincoln's out at USC, so Garrett Riley looks like he would bring, a lot of good knowledge in X's and O's, but I'm not ready to crown Garrett Riley a fantastic offensive coordinator yet, because he did it with Max Duggan, and I've seen other coordinators and head coaches look good with a player who has a special year, and then they go on to not be the person that we thought they were going to be.
Right. Yes. I just wanted to throw that one out there, just because we do have a little bit of a Clemson following over here, so we wanted to make sure that we did touch.
I'll tell you, I grew up in Alabaster, which borders Pelham, so the Sweeneys and I go way back to summer league baseball, and when Dabo was in Tuscaloosa, we've been friends. We text occasionally, and he does a tremendous job. And it's unfair to say that Clemson, and to be questioned that their program has fallen off. Is fair because it was so good, but degrees of falling off is what we're talking about here.
Right.
Dabo and Clemson are getting the same treatment that Alabama gets, right? Because they were at the same level with Alabama. So, okay, Alabama hasn't won a national championship since 2020. What's wrong, right? Clemson hasn't won a national championship since 2018. What's wrong? Oh my God, we haven't won a national championship in 4 seasons now. What is wrong? Everybody can't win one every year. There's other people that's got to win one. Everybody's, oh God, can Ryan Day coach? Can he win the big one now at Ohio State? Ohio State's been pretty good. They just haven't won a national championship since 2014. Ryan Day's never won one. I don't know if he's going to win one, but he's a pretty darn good coach. All of a sudden, Jim Harbaugh's winning. Everybody can't win. Kirby Smart's got a machine going. He's won back-to-back and can be the first guy ever to win 3 in a row. But, Dabo's program is pretty good at Clemson. He still recruits really well. I wouldn't be worried about it if I was Clemson.
No, I agree with you. Now, since you brought up Kirby Smart, at Georgia, so, what's the outlook, do you think? They've lost a ton of players going to the NFL the last 2 years. They did go back-to-back. They're losing Stetson Bennett. What do you think the outlook is? Is the perception of them being the number 1 team next year, is that fair, do you think?
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely fair. I mean, they are what Alabama was in 2011 or 2012, or pick a period of time since Nick Saban's been there. When you look at it on paper, who else are you going to put number 1 if it's not Georgia? And you're going to talk to me about losing a quarterback in Stetson Bennett. Well, how about I tell you they got a quarterback that's more talented than Stetson Bennett. Now, does that mean they're going to win a national championship? It doesn't. Stetson Bennett won 2 of them. The next guy may not be a national champion. I will tell you, Mac Jones won a national championship as quarterback. 100%. I mean, you can poll 100 people and they will tell you Bryce Young was a better quarterback than Mac Jones, but he has 0 national championships for it. So you can improve at that position, right? And still not be national champions. So I actually think Georgia's going to have a better quarterback than Stetson Bennett. But are they going to have just as good of a secondary? Are they going to have just as good of linebackers, an unbelievable defensive line, great running backs, great offensive line, a receiving core that's functional enough to win the national championship? But Georgia's going to be there. We're playing one more year with the divisions, with the old schedule. That schedule for Georgia this year is easy peasy. They got 11, 12 wins without even really sweating this thing. You can book them in Atlanta. The Tennessee's taking a step back. There's nobody else in the East that's going to scare them. Kentucky may be better with Liam Cohen back. Shane Beamer's doing a wonderful job at South Carolina. They're still building at Florida. Georgia will be in Atlanta. The question is, will they be there 11-1 or will they be there 12-0? But either way, they'll be there and they'll be playing for a chance to go back to the college football playoffs. We'll just see who's there against them. Will it be LSU? Will it be Alabama? Can Texas A&M get it right? Who else could it be? But Georgia will be there 100%.
I agree with you that I think Georgia will be there in Atlanta. That's for sure. So let's talk about John's team for just a minute, since we're talking about spring football.
Who is John's team?
He's an Auburn fan.
Okay, all right.
Well,
I like
he's
this.
an Auburn. He's an Auburn alum as well. I always say fan, but he's an Auburn alum. But they hired Hugh Freeze, and I don't know if you have gotten a chance to speak to him or know anything about what's going on with the program since they hired Hugh. I just wanted to bring it up and see what your insights were for Auburn football.
Well, I haven't talked to Hugh since he's been at Auburn, but I hopefully have a golf date with him coming up here in May, a dinner, and then the next day play a little golf with him. So I'm looking forward to that. But I am friends with a couple of the boosters that are helping Hugh get things going down at Auburn. And the first thing I'll tell you about Hugh Freeze is that he will improve the roster at Auburn, which is needed. That roster had slipped down to where, other than Vanderbilt, you probably couldn't find a weaker roster of personnel in the SEC than you had at Auburn. So you just didn't have the Jimmies and the Joes on that roster that compared. I mean, you're talking about trying to win a championship or win a division or go to a major bowl game when you're having to play the likes of Georgia and Alabama Tennessee and LSU and Florida and all these people that haven't had the recruiting, the coaches who have sort of lacked in the recruiting circles the last few years. Auburn's roster had deteriorated down to a very, very bad spot. And that's Hugh's first job, is to come back in and to build that back up. And he took a lot of great strides in the portal on replacing the offensive line, which is a great place to start. I still feel like they will look and find a quarterback at some point before they get to summer camp, fall camp, and get ready for the start of the season. I'm still not sure the quarterback next year is at Auburn right now. But if it's Robbie Ashford or Gerner or even Finley, then we will see what Hugh can do. But it is a situation where I think Auburn dodged a bullet on Lane Kiffin. I don't think Lane Kiffin would have worked at Auburn. Hugh Freeze is the kind of guy, as Neil McCready said on our show, Auburn's one of those places, a special place where you need to mingle with Auburn people like you see Bruce Pearl do. You got to be able to ignite the Auburn fans and the Auburn boosters and have them all pulling in the same direction like Pat Dye was able to do back in the 80s. And Lane Kiffin would have never done that. Lane Kiffin is a guy that doesn't like to go, as Neil said on our show, and light the Christmas tree in the town square, or go hand out donuts and pizza on finals day to all the students like Bruce Pearl does. You'll see Hugh Freeze doing that. Neil famously said on our show, Hugh not only will light the town square Christmas tree, he'll go to every house on the street and light Christmas trees if you want him to. He's a team builder, and that's what Auburn needs, and Hugh Freeze is perfect for that. He'll build the infrastructure up. He'll get the recruiting right, and then he's a dang good football coach, too. He calls a great game. He's got a good offensive plan. He's good with quarterbacks. He's built a really good coaching staff, but the guy can recruit. He'll sell the mamas and daddies and get those kids in there.
He can definitely recruit.
He can, and that's where it's all at. And I think Nick Saban would even tell you that at times he and his organization they may not have been the best X's and O's coaches over the last 15 years, but they've been dynamic at recruiting. And that's where it starts. If you go to battle with the best players, you got the best chance of winning. Got to coach them up after they get there, and Nick and the staff does a great job with that. But you got to have great players if you're going to be a great football team. So you got to put a premium on recruiting, and Hugh Freeze will do that.
So what you were talking about with the Auburn head coaches, doesn't matter what sport it is, because of what you were describing, is that once you're done at Auburn as a head coach, you can then immediately go right into politics.
Well, that's been done. It's been done.
It's been done.
But I'm not a big.
That is who they are.
I'm a big Tommy Tuberville head coach fan. I'm not a huge Tommy Tuberville senator fan yet. He's got to prove something to me.
Well, I didn't say that it was necessarily your side. I was just saying that what they do.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not firing up the Jets trying to replace him as senator yet, but I'm hoping somewhere in his term in Washington he's got an undefeated season coming. Maybe he can get Jason Campbell on his staff up there. But I would tell you that what Auburn has right now with Hugh and Bruce and Butch, that's probably the best three coaches at the same time they've had in my career, and I've been doing it since '89. I think it's the best in line of the three coaches they've ever had down there. They've had, a good baseball and a good football coach before. Bruce is probably their first good basketball coach they've had. Cliff was good for a bit, but then maybe football was lagging or baseball was lagging. To me, this is the best Auburn has been in all three sports for a long time. The question now, can you keep them all? Can you keep them all happy? And can you keep everybody pulling in the same direction? I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be really special for Auburn.
Right. And I agree, because I've watched that, for a long time. And I do agree with that statement right there, that this is the best that it's been in a long time for Auburn.
Well, Jim, I'm going to run off of something you said. You said you thought Auburn's the players, had fallen off probably more so than anybody but Vanderbilt. But Florida the last year or two has lost a lot of talent and doesn't have the kind of players and talent that they have had as well. They had a first-year coach last year, and I just wanted to kind of, talk about where you think they are going to be in the East, kind of the last year of the East.
Well, I mean, Florida is in a probably for Florida a low period of time as far as their roster as well. But Billy Napier is switching over the entire roster to his style, so it's sort of a transition time, getting out Dan Mullen's players and bringing in Billy Napier's players. Remember that team was really, really good in 2020, and they played Alabama as close as anybody during that
Right.
national championship season. That team in 2020 was in the SEC championship game, and if we were in an expanded playoff, Florida would have easily been into a 12-team playoff. And if they'd have won that game that night, it would have been interesting to see where they would have been in the college football selection process. So they're not too far removed from having a better roster than, say, Auburn has had over the last few years. It's been a beat since I think Auburn's been really, really top of the SEC good. But for Florida,
There was a lot of transfers, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you got to live with. And Billy Napier approaches things a lot different than Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen wasn't as big a hard ass as Billy Napier is. Billy Napier is cut from the cloth of Dabo Swinney, of Nick Saban, having worked with both of those guys. And he's trying to build a program, put in his foundation. If you go back to Alabama's first year under Nick Saban, there were a lot of players that didn't hang around or were not asked to hang around after Nick Saban got to Tuscaloosa, and they didn't have the portal. If they'd had the portal back then, I can only imagine what would have happened that first spring when Nick Saban got to town after Mike Shula. If there had been a portal where you could leave one time and play somewhere else, I don't know how many people would have hung around in Tuscaloosa when Nick Saban, because it was night and day. And that's what it was with Billy Napier and Dan Mullen. So to see so many people leave, that doesn't surprise me at all. But I will tell you that I believe that Billy Napier has a long, long time in Gainesville. If Scott Strickland will stick with him, now you got to get quarterback right, and they're going to roll the dice this year with Graham Mertz. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with Anthony Richardson going off to the NFL and looking like he's going to be a first-round draft pick. But I don't think Anthony Richardson was his style of quarterback. Doesn't really fit what he wants to do, and it'll be interesting to see if Graham Mertz does. But you're in the East, and right now, to me, I would put Georgia at the top. That next line below them, I would go Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, probably in that order this year. Maybe Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, and then we get down talking about Florida a little bit, and that's where if you're a Florida fan, you don't like being in that conversation. If it's not you Georgia, then you're out of whack a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kentucky's, had their number the last couple of years at least for a change. As a Kentucky fan, that's a change for me, which is good. And with Liam Cohen coming back, there's optimism anyway, at least in Kentucky, at least for right now.
Well, I mean, and I can't remember his name right now, but the offensive line coach who came from Kentucky to Alabama, he's been tremendous. Nick Saban loves him because he's, recruiting, athletic 300-pound, offensive linemen. He's coaching him up and getting back to more of a physical style of offensive line play, which is why
he's a good offensive line coach.
Absolutely. And Saban absolutely loves him. So, and he's a good recruiter too. So that's been a win for Alabama. And I think that's where Kentucky fell off a little bit last year. I didn't think their offensive line looked the same. It didn't look like Kentucky's offensive line like they've looked over the last two O-line coaches they've had there. And it'll be interesting to see if they get back to that style of play. And if you get a little bit more protection, I think you got a quarterback that'll quickly make you forget Will Levis. And I think Devin Leary from NC State is a guy that can make Kentucky look really, really good this year.
Oh, I agree with that. And the offensive line was definitely the major problem last year, and kept Levis, was injured and hurt and playing hurt most of the season because of all the sacks and the beatings that he took from the poor offensive line play. And you're exactly right. Eric Warford went to Alabama, and that was a major key for the reason why.
Yeah. So you tell me, do you think Will Levis is an NFL quarterback?
Yes, I do. Yes, I think Will Levis is an NFL quarterback. He has all the tools. I do think that he's a little bit of a gunslinger, but I don't think that is something that will hold back. I mean, there's been gunslingers like Brett Favre and people like that that's been in the NFL for a lot of years, and I kind of think Will Levis on the football field has that mentality.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of that he's been, more compared to like a Josh Allen, and Josh Allen took a few years before he got to where he's at now. It didn't happen overnight, and I wonder if that's something that whoever gets Will Levis will be patient and do something. And it's really hard to be patient if you get him in the first round or in the first few picks that you kind of.
He's working with Jordan Palmer. He's working with Jordan Palmer right now, and Jordan Palmer is one of the best, quarterback coaches that there is. So we'll see if he can get him, straightened out just a little bit, and not have quite so much of that gunslinger that I like to call it, mentality, because that's kind of what he has.
The NFL is such a funny game, and it's funny that you as a Kentucky guy really think Will Levis will do it in the NFL. Me as an Alabama guy, I had some doubt about Tua Tagovailoa. There's no way I thought Mac Jones or Jalen Hurts, and I don't really think Bryce is going to be great either. Meanwhile, all four of them are going to be starting next year in the NFL. Jalen Hurts was an MVP and was in the Super Bowl and probably should have won the Super Bowl.
Well, now,
so it's, I never know. I'm horrible.
I did like Mac Jones
picking quarterbacks.
Yeah,
I did like Mac Jones, and it really didn't surprise me that Jalen has turned out to be a good quarterback as well. I was a little surprised by Tua. The way he's played in the NFL, I was a little surprised by him. But now Bryce is going to be there pretty soon, and I'd say, like, you're right, all four will be starting pretty soon, I would think.
And who knows? Maybe after this XFL run, I haven't watched one down of the XFL yet, but everybody tells me AJ McCarron looks good, so
he does.
Maybe AJ gets another shot too.
He does look good. I've actually watched a little bit of it. He does actually look really good. I actually made a post today, or shared a post today about AJ McCarron. He's got like 67% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns. He's doing well in the XFL.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and catch some tape on that. That'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. While we're talking right now, I've been kind of keeping up with the UAB North Texas. It's just started, and North Texas has started out with a 7-0 run. It is now 10-2 North Texas over UAB early on in the game. I guess we can jump right in. You talked to Jelly Walker today. Out there in Las Vegas. So what are your thoughts on UAB and North Texas in the NIT championship and just Conference USA as a whole with everything that they have done and accomplished in these tournaments?
Well, I mean, you're asking me with UAB down 8 already, that what I think of the game. That seems like that's unfair.
Well, it's not looking good, but doesn't mean that it can't flip.
Hopefully there's still probably I don't have it on, but it's probably 36 minutes left to go. So maybe they can rally back and close the gap. I listen, Conference USA's had a wonderful run here in the postseason, but I'm not going to come here and on here and sugarcoat it. I don't think the NIT should exist. I don't think the CBI should exist. We put 68 teams. We're about to put 90 teams into the NCAA tournament when we expand the tournament again. And that's going to happen sooner rather than later. It's a nice run for UAB. If you end up getting in this tournament, you might as well win it, I guess. But, the fact I'm doing your show right now and I'm not glued to the TV shows you my interest in the NIT. I just don't see the point of it. And, I guess it was big in the 50s or the 60s, but I'm an old guy. I'm an old guy, and it's never been that important to me. And I've seen Alabama go to New York before, and I've seen UAB go to this point a couple other times before this. And it's always a weird feeling, like, how can I be really this excited about this when the other guys are in Houston getting ready to play for the national championship? It's nice. Everybody compares it to college football bowl games. So I guess if UAB wins tonight and it's like winning the Capital One Bowl back in the day or the Peach Bowl, then that's a good thing. But if you want to make it a positive, okay, so Andy Kennedy's building something at UAB. They were in the tournament last year as a 12 seed. They got upset. They lost. They were not upset. They lost the game like they were supposed to, but they were in the NCAA tournament. And they battled FAU this year. They split regular season games and then lost in the conference tournament championship game. And FAU's in the Final Four. So UAB's a good basketball team. And if they had been in the NCAA tournament, who knows how deep they would have gone. They could be what Florida Atlantic is, and that's a team playing in the Final Four this weekend. But the system we have and the way we did it, they weren't, and they're playing in the NIT tonight. I hope they win it. As for Conference USA, it's it has never in this part of the Conference USA history been a good conference to me. When it stopped being the conference that had Louisville and Cincinnati and Marquette and DePaul, it stopped being a great conference to me. When UAB was in that conference and it was built to be a basketball conference, and it had Marquette and it had Cincinnati, who was number one in the country at the time with Kenyon Martin and Bob Huggins.
That's right.
And you had Rick Pitino at Louisville. And I mean, DePaul, I mean, that was great basketball there. And UAB fit in great with them. And that was a good Conference USA. When it all fell apart and you started getting directional Texas schools and UTSA and UTEP and North Texas, and you lost, some of the others, and you bring in the Old Dominions and all of that, and the Florida Atlantic and the FIU, it became a bad football conference. It became a bad basketball conference. For the last 3 or 4 years, was praying that UAB would go back to their original place, which was the Sun Belt Conference, which plays tremendous football. It plays pretty good basketball. But some of your viewers and listeners may be old enough to remember that back in the 70s and early 80s, the Sun Belt was a 2-bid league almost every year, sometimes 3 bids in it. The VCU used to
Western.
Western Kentucky, VCU used to be in that league. South Alabama used to be really good. UAB and Gene Bartow would throw teams into the tournament. So you can make a league better. I'm excited about them moving to the American, but as they move to the American, the AAC, there goes Houston leaving. There goes Cincinnati leaving. So you're taking basically a lot of Conference USA and moving it to the American. You'll still have Wichita State, you'll have Memphis and some other good basketball programs. So it will be better, but it's still not the league I want it to be. And honest to goodness, I'd give it up. If I was in charge of UAB athletics, I would have taken a bid from the Sun Belt over the American in a heartbeat. And I know I'm the only person standing on that mountain, but I love where the Sun Belt is right now. I love where the Sun Belt is.
Hey, now you did talk about the trifecta of Auburn's coaches with Butch and Hugh and Bruce Pearl. What about UAB's trifecta of coaches between the 3 coaches that they have right now?
Well, I love Casey Dunn at the baseball. He was a guy who caught at Auburn, and his dad was a high school legend, Sammy Dunn. Actually, he was the coach of one of the rivals. I played at Thompson. He coached at Vestavia. So in my playing days, Sammy was the guy we were always trying to beat or be like. So Casey's a great coach. He proved that at Sanford. He built that. So he'll get UAB going in a really good direction. To be honest, I don't know a lot about the AAC, how competitive that league is. I know, the Southern Misses of the old Conference USA played some pretty good baseball, but where they're heading, I assume they'll still be good baseball. Basketball, I love Andy Kennedy. Football, Trent Dilfer, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And I know it's easy to like the guy because he can talk well, and he used to be on TV, and he ran the Elite 11, and he won a Super Bowl. But they lost 21 seniors That was a veteran team last year that underachieved. When Bill Clark had them, they were winning championships. They were always competitive.
Right.
Then you turn it over when Bill steps away right before the season and your coordinator takes over, and they underachieved last year. No two ways about it. That team should have won or contended for the conference championship. Now you lose all those players. Trent's a sexy name. Can he recruit? Can he keep things going? Time will tell. But to me, when you lose tackle to tackle, every offensive lineman who played most of the downs in 3 years, that's a tough place to start,
That's
right?
pretty tough.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And you got a great run. The running backs will be fine, but you
Right.
lose tackle to tackle and a lot of other players all over, 21 players. It's a tough place to be. And oh, by the way, you're heading to the American, and it's going to be a little juicier in the American.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so Trent, you're talking about Trent Dilfer for just a second. I mean, he should have quite a bit of recruiting ties, doing the Elite 11 and doing the stuff that he's done before in his past. So, that I would think that would help him on the recruiting side.
Yeah, you're right. He should have a relationship with some high school coaches around the country.
Right.
And, quarterback, I don't worry about, because I do feel like, you can sell yourself that I was an NFL quarterback, and I can show you my Super Bowl ring. I got it right here. The Elite 11. I'm friends with all these guys who ran through the Elite 11. Now do the other 21. Can I put together a coaching staff? Can I, build a staff to bring in players to UAB to do that? And I will tell you that program has come, light years from where it used to be. The facilities are fantastic. They will fit in this new conference really well. The home stadium is fantastic now. I just worry about, this hire and whether or not Trent Dilfer can make this work. And especially this first year, it's not, my question isn't how good can this team be? It's how bad can this team be this year? And if he has them 6-6, some people may gripe and moan about that. To me, I would say, if I'm a UAB fan, if that's as bad it's gonna be 6-6, we're in a good place. If we're 7-5 or 8-4, what a great job. Give him conference coach of the year at that point. Moving to a new league and losing that many players, transitioning coachings and coaching staffs. If you're bowl eligible this year, he's done a heck of a job.
What about 4 wins?
Then all of a sudden you're like, okay, how can I stop from this becoming a trend? How is this not? How can I keep it from being 4 wins the next year or 3 wins the next year? You don't want to go back to where UAB used to be or where some of the bottom dwellers are in conferences, because very easily on the recruiting trail, especially moving to a new league, you can get the reputation of being i.e. the Vanderbilt of whatever conference you're in, and you don't want to be that, right?
Right.
Hey, Kentucky understands that one when it comes to football.
And I think everybody's had their turn in the barrel where you've been near the bottom, right?
Right.
You don't want to be there. It's just how long are you going to be there? And
right.
And UAB, it'll cycle around. They'll have a bad year at some point. You just don't want it to turn into what defines you as a program now that you've built yourself into such a great place.
Right. Since we were talking, UAB has caught up. They have now taken the lead in the under 12 media timeout. I believe it is 15-12 UAB. So they have,
Imagine that basketball, a game of runs. How about that?
Yeah.
Imagine.
Hey, Kennedy's done a good job there. That's for sure.
Yeah. And you look at what Andy Kennedy did at Ole Miss and Kermit Davis, who came in, who is an excellent basketball coach, and see the numbers he put up compared to what Andy did. Andy did a wonderful job at Ole Miss. They just kept missing the tournament just a little bit. They were so close.
One game here and there. Yeah.
Yep. And if Andy Kennedy was at Ole Miss doing what he did back then in this SEC, because remember when Andy was there, we struggled as a conference to get 3 bids, to get 4 bids.
Right.
We weren't turning out 8 bids. Andy Kennedy would have been in the tournament almost every year in this SEC with this reputation.
Right.
The problem with Andy was the rest of the SEC sucked too. So his wins didn't count as much as the wins you get now. The fact that Mississippi State was in the tournament, albeit a play-in game, you had Missouri in the tournament. You had the other teams from the SEC that were in the tournament this year. Andy would have been a tournament team every year at Ole Miss if the rest of the league had been as good as it is right now.
Right.
I agree with that statement because he always had Ole Miss hair almost every year, just outside of it. I think he made it maybe once or twice while he was there to the tournament, but most of the years he was out.
Yeah, he was really good in the NIT.
I was about to say, he's an NIT guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that's where he's now.
Right.
Yeah.
Really good
I set you up for
NIT.
that.
Yeah, he did. That's right.
what I was doing. I set you up for that
Set
one.
it up.
Yeah. You did.
Look, Brad, if you don't know,
Yeah, you did.
Jim here
He's really
drives the bus. He drives the bus, and he's able to drive it right where he needs to put it. He can park it.
Yeah.
That's what
right
a good point guard does. I set you up
That's
there.
right.
He
sets it up.
Yeah. That's true.
But
all right, so I want to talk to you about the Final Four that's coming up.
now that we've kind of had some UAB stuff, but talk about some of the everybody else, the rest of college, more of a way too early picks.
Okay.
For
everybody seemed to be breaking up there, or maybe I was breaking up.
I think it went everybody.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you lost me or what.
Yeah, your question is college football playoffs next year. I'll run through who I think the contenders are from the major conferences.
Okay.
I still think from the ACC it is Clemson, though Florida State is coming.
Right.
But I still think it's Clemson. But I'll keep an eye a little bit on North Carolina. But I'm not as sold on Drake May as most everybody else. We'll do the other conferences before we get to the SEC and the Big Ten. In the Big 12, I think it's wide open. I have a feeling that Oklahoma and Texas will decide it this year after a great year by TCU last year. I expect TCU to fall back. Losing Garrett Riley and Max Duggan, I think, will be an impact on TCU a little bit. So I think it'll be a Texas and Oklahoma type year. They're out in the Pac-12. Washington took some steps forward, but I think USC is the team to beat. And we'll see if they can put the players around Bo Nix at Oregon like they did. Utah still going to be pretty good, but I think it's USC the team to beat. In the Big Ten, I would watch out for Penn State. Michigan's been good the last 2 years. Ohio State is one of the big three. Their roster is better than everybody else's, but Penn State's going to improve at quarterback with their new quarterback. The guy who's been there the last few years was very Bo Nix-like, but the kid that's coming in, I think, is a actual better quarterback. They've got a great running game with two good running backs back, unbelievable receiving core, old school Penn State defense there. And in fact, it will not shock me. It's hard for me not to pick Ohio State. But if not Ohio State, I'll go Penn State ahead of even Michigan this year in the Big Ten. And in the Southeastern Conference, you start with Georgia, and then you ask the question, if not Georgia, then who? So if not Georgia, for me, you go LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, because those three are the better rosters. Tennessee, I think, takes a step back a little bit because of their receiving core, which was fantastic last year, and a little bit of the offensive line, though Nico Amelieva is a guy that I think will end up being the quarterback, but Joe Milton's arm is tremendous. And I don't worry about Josh Heupel when it comes to calling plays and having great schemes. I just don't think their receivers will be as dynamic like they were last year. And I think all you have to do is look 2020 Alabama to 2021 Alabama or 2022 Alabama and just see how those receivers declined a little bit and how that can impact you even when you got a great quarterback.
Right.
I'm not sure Ole Miss is going to have the year they had last year. Getting back to 9 wins will be tough for them. Zach Arnett is in a tough situation because he can't play Mike Leach's ball in Starkville, so I don't expect a lot from them. Hughes building at Auburn. South Carolina has done tremendous things, but I just don't think they can get to the point where they're contending. Same with Kentucky. Great for Kentucky, but not enough to get into a playoff conversation. So if you ask me right off the bat here, I would say USC is in as the Pac-12 champion. I would say Big Ten champions in Ohio State and/or Penn State. SEC champions in, I would say Georgia or LSU, and then the other one will be either a second SEC team or a second Big Ten team. So my 4 right here, subject to change, I probably would go USC, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama in the college football playoffs.
There we go. Can't really go wrong with that one. I mean, that sounds fair.
yeah. And that sounds like 4 pretty good teams this early.
But LSU is really, really good.
They are going to be good.
Yeah, they are good, and they were in Atlanta last year, and I expect them to be better. But for some reason, I just, maybe I'm too close to the forest to see the trees, but I don't think Alabama's done yet.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think Alabama's done yet as far as being at the top. I really don't. As long as you got Saban there, you got a chance.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting. Yeah. It'll be interesting because, I do think bringing Bobby Petrino into College Station can help solve some issues. He's a tremendous coach. I want to see how that relationship plays out. But Brian Kelly's a great coach, and he will get one sooner rather than later. And you just wonder, is it possible that maybe it's LSU and Alabama, that LSU and Alabama have such a great year that, whoever wins the SEC championship game, that the other team from the West that didn't go is in there. But see what it is. This is the last year of the 4, right? It goes to 12 after this, and then that's when it really gets interesting. Yeah.
So we're part of the fanboys, and a lot of them are from South Carolina, so there are a lot of Clemson fans, and what we're doing here, presented by, and so quite a few people that think the Clemson might, with Garrett Riley and might be able to get there this year.
Well, they'll be in the conversation. I think the key there is going to be, if you lose one game,
is the ACC good enough? Is the ACC good enough? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
USA basketball. There you go.
And that's not fair, and that's why I'm looking forward to going to 12, because I'm a big fan of automatic bids. And I'll tell you why I'm a big fan of automatic bids. I think there are times when your conference, maybe isn't the best of the conferences, and your champion, needs that automatic bid to get in there. But there are times that your conference is so good that you're going to beat up on each other, and sometimes you get left out, and you don't get to be in the playoffs because your conference may be so deep that your conference champion had 2 losses. So I like going to 12, and I like the automatic bid, knowing that if I win the ACC, then I'm in the playoffs. If I win the SEC,
my only thing with the automatic bid, and we talked about it this year because you looked at some of these things this year. So the Big 12 championship game was won by a 3-loss team. They had 3 losses.
Yep. Win the game.
So,
it eats up a spot.
A 3-loss team getting that automatic bid, you're okay?
It doesn't bother me at all, because what we're going to do is we're about to get rid of the divisions. Now, they didn't have divisions there. But I think we saw TCU and the way they handled Michigan and won that game, that if you get into a playoff, then even the team that lost your conference championship game can still do some damage in the playoffs. So I think TCU would have still been in last year, in my opinion. And Kansas State would have eaten up a spot. And that's why there's a value on you winning the conference championship, because that guarantees you a spot in. If you're just playing to be a wild card team, to be your second best team in the conference, you may get bounced out on championship Saturday, because there may be upsets all over college football. So you better win your conference to guarantee your spot in case there are 3-loss teams. We're okay with it in the NFL. We're okay with it in other sports. So that doesn't scare me away. And what we're doing, we're getting rid of the divisions. So it's going to be the best 2 teams in every conference that will be playing for those conference championships. And now what's going to happen is I think it's going to really water down the conference championships, because in a lot of places, like the SEC and the Big Ten, I think those 2 teams playing for the conference championship, most likely both of them are still going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Especially SEC, Big Ten, Big 12 even probably.
what's the old saying about our legal system, right? You'd rather let 2 or 3 guilty people walk than to convict one innocent person. I'm that way about the automatic bids. I would rather, have a 3-loss Kansas State in a playoff every now and then when it happens, as opposed to leaving out a good or a great 1-loss or 2-loss team just because they were in a tough conference. I'd rather have those automatic bids win that conference championship and guarantee, because who's to say, we as SEC fans, we always say we're the best, right? We're the best. And the Big Ten fans think they're the best. But who's to say at some point that the Pac-12 wasn't so dadgum good this year? I'm not saying in reality, because I never think this, but what if they were so good that they really did play really good football out there, and they just beat it? Maybe they had 4 good teams and they beat each other up, and we didn't put them in the playoffs. I think having an automatic bid in, it gives the Pac-12 a chance to come in and prove themselves, or the ACC, or the Big 12, and then one of the group of 5s. I mean, look what FAU's done this year in basketball. I didn't think they would do that. I looked down my nose at Conference USA.
You can do the automatic bids a little easier when you got 12 teams instead of 4.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it with 4. There was no way. But with 12 teams, you could have done it with 8. Probably could have done it with 6. But you definitely could do it with 12. And that's why I'm excited about 12. I don't really want to go more than 12. But I'm sure, somewhere eventually we'll go more than 12 at some point. You can count on it. We'll be at 16. Who knows after that? I don't know how much further we'll go, but 12 is good. I was happy with 64 in basketball.
I don't want more. I don't want more in basketball. You was talking about them going to 90. I don't want more in basketball.
Yeah, and it's going to happen. I mean, and what's going to happen is, we're going to have a whole full day of games on Tuesday, a full day of games on Wednesday, and feed all those teams into the bracket, into our normal bracket for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, but that's still the same thing. You're just giving these people a play-in bone, just like the play-in bone, the games now. I mean, that's all it is.
We are just completely wiping out production for America in that entire week, as opposed to just Thursday.
I mean, it's just you're giving them a bone. You're giving them a play-in bone is all you're doing.
Yeah. And that's what it will be, because you do. And your point is that somehow we've got to, and this may sound silly, but somehow we've got to keep that one sheet bracket of 64 teams that we all fill out. That every, people that don't watch basketball, don't watch sports, Jane in accounting, Tony over in shipping, they don't know anything about sports, but
engineering.
Damn it, they want to put their $10 into the bracket and pick teams by which mascot would beat up other mascots and which color.
Right.
And, somebody probably Joyce from up in accounting, who had a friend who went to FAU, probably is winning your bracket because she had FAU in the Final Four.
Right.
But that makes billions of dollars in our country, and the bracket's not going to go away. So you've got to figure out a way to keep that 64 team bracket going on Thursday. And the only way you're going to do that is the play-in bone, like you said, Tuesday and Wednesday.
So one quick question about that. Yeah. Okay. So it's been that a lot of these, different entities offer up $1 million for a perfect bracket with the 64 team bracket. When you have 90 teams, do you think that purse goes way up?
Well, I mean, they can make it a bazillion dollars. Yeah. I mean, the chance of getting it perfect, we've seen, and you're right. We actually pay insurance. We pay insurance to guarantee, protect ourselves when we have the $1 million bracket. Right. So if it ever happens, some insurance company will be paying that $1 million. Right. But we debate every year. Should we even pay the insurance? Because it's a few $1,000s. Should we even pay it, or should we just roll the dice?
Yeah.
And every time we end up paying it because we don't have the what's to lay it on the line. The one year we don't pay the insurance, all of a sudden it'll be like chalk.
Right.
Everybody won that's supposed to win 4 ones in the championship. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that would be what happened. But we debate every time. Should we write the check for X many thousands of dollars to buy the insurance? And we do it every time. We always debate it. We're like, man, why don't we just save that? Because it's a pretty chunk of money. Why don't we just save that money and not even just let's all take 1,000 of it and go to the beach or something.
Right.
Let's talk about the Final Four real quick. So we got 4 teams left. It's definitely not the 4 teams that we all thought it would be. I think maybe UConn, some people would have there out of the 4 teams. But outside of that, the other 3 teams that's there with Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, and Miami, I do not think most people would have put in their bracket. So what do you think about how the tournament's been and what the Final Four looks like?
Well, it's been chaotic like the regular season was. I mean, I did have UConn in my Final Four, but I had, Houston and UConn playing each other, and I had Alabama and Duke playing each other, which, by the way, would have been a really exciting Final Four. And I would be talking to you from Houston tonight and not from Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I would have been really excited about that. But
Right.
the tournament is what it is. I love the upsets when they happen, when they don't happen to your team. And this is going to sound weird. I like the upsets in the first round. I like the upsets on Saturday and Sunday. But when we get to the Sweet 16 the next weekend, I sort of like it to be the good teams.
Yeah.
The
do too.
big boys.
I do too, actually.
And I sort of like, and I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Jim, Alabama's not one of the big boys. I know we're not usually part of that party, but this year, Alabama was one of the big boys. I wish that, I wish we had, when we got to the Sweet 16, I wish we had 16 of the greatest teams in the history of basketball. And I wish we had some of the quote unquote blue bloods in Houston this week. And I loved it last year. I'm not a Duke or North Carolina fan, but I sat on my couch and I cheered and watched the spectacle it was, those 2 fan bases that hate each other so much, knowing what was on the line for Coach K. It couldn't be better. You can't tell me that if we ever get to a playoff that Alabama and Auburn are playing each other, or Texas and Texas A&M are playing each other in a playoff, or Kentucky and Louisville in basketball. I remember the first time they got faced up with each other in the NCAA tournament.
I do too. Listen, I was a kid, but I didn't
grow up. You're right. I didn't grow up there, but my God, I watched it because I was like, oh my God, Kentucky and Louisville are about to play each other in the NCAA tournament.
For the Final
I've got to watch
this.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, got to watch it. Got to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I love about college sports. I mean, I'm watching. I'm not a huge college baseball fan, but I'm watching Texas and Texas A&M the other night because it's Texas and Texas A&M. That's what I show up for college sports about. And when it's the Final Four, I enjoy the big boys playing. I will watch it. I'm not going to be one of those guys that says, I'm not going to watch it. Yes, the ratings will be down. Those stories will be bogus. They'll be true about the ratings, but it'll be, there'll be people screaming, oh, college basketball is in decline, blah, 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 blah. It's just going to be down because it's not North Carolina and Duke or Kentucky.
And Kansas. Last year, Kansas was there too. Right. You had North Carolina, Duke, Kansas. I mean, come on, So
it's fun, but truthfully, and I think a lot of people feel this way, I'd like it to be my team and then 3 other blue bloods, right? And then that way you feel like, oh, look who I'm hanging out with.
Now you feel legit when you beat them, right?
Boys, how are you guys?
You feel legit when you beat them.
Yeah.
It's like, I want the best team.
Like Auburn.
I want the best
like
teams
Auburn
there.
when they went to the Final Four. Auburn, where they run through North Carolina, they run through Kentucky, they get there, you look around. Oh, hey, there's Tom Izzo, Michigan State.
Yeah.
Oh, Jim Nance is over there talking to Virginia, and over there talking to Texas Tech. It felt big because Izzo and Michigan State was there, and Virginia's got some history, and they were there. And Texas Tech was sort of new money as well, but it felt big because of who Auburn had beaten to get there. Totally. And you sort of like it when those guys are there.
Well, speaking of the big ones, so South Carolina and Caitlin Clark is against Iowa. And to me, out of all the semifinal games in the Final Four this weekend, if you ask me, in my opinion, the one that I'm looking forward to the most is Iowa, Caitlin Clark versus Leah Boston, Dawn Staley in South Carolina. And I know.
Well, I mean, it does. If no, I'm watching it. I've got it circled to appointment television for me. And I know what you're saying. Even the men's semifinal game, that's the bigger game because what you have is you have a dynasty in South Carolina. and
Yes.
they are what Geno and UConn was. They are what Pat and Tennessee used to be, and back when I
Right.
was a kid, what Louisiana Tech used to be. This is a dynasty that Dawn has going on at South Carolina, and it's Caitlin Clark who is what appears to be the best player in the country,
Right.
and it seems like a one-person show against the dynasty, and it will be great television. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Larry Bird and Little Indiana State, who the only thing those other kids did at Indiana State back in 1979, they inbounded the ball to Larry Bird, right?
Yeah, right.
Occasionally, when Larry would stop his dribble, they would pass it to somebody else, and then somebody else would give it back to Larry Bird. And Michigan State had Magic Johnson, but they were a better team.
Right.
That's what this is. There's Caitlin Clark and 4 people that are going to inbound the ball to her, taking on a dynasty in South Carolina. I think South Carolina will win it because team is better than one player, but she is fun to watch.
So Caitlin Clark does have a center and a big girl that's in there that she feeds and gets a lot of assists to. But I agree with you. It is Caitlin Clark's team, and it reminds you of that one person team that she does have a few other players, helps her along the way because dishes out a ton of assists as well. Caitlin Clark does.
Yeah.
She is just really, truly a special player. And I'm just really interested to see how she does lining up against Dawn Staley's and her dynasty, South Carolina and Boston and that bunch, because like you said, I mean, more than likely Dawn Staley is on her way to another, national championship right now. They're undefeated.
Yeah. And I think Dawn would be a great, and we've thought about this a couple of times over the years, whether it's with Geno at UConn or Pat at Tennessee.
To coach the boys.
At some point, I'd love to see some team say, you know what, Dawn Staley's good enough to come lead my program.
Yep.
And, and I'm not saying at South Carolina, I'm saying anywhere. Just say, all right, so let's go get the best coach available.
Yep.
And I think Dawn Staley is the best coach available. Let's go get Dawn Staley and see what she could do with our men's program.
I think so
interesting
too.
to see what she could do. I don't know if she would do it or not. And I guess for some people it would be insulting to even ask her, why would I want to go coach the men? I'm coaching the women right now. I get, there's great satisfaction and great merit in coaching the women, and I understand that. But I think Dawn Staley, there's certain people, right? Dawn Staley is one of them. I think Geno to some degree was one. Pat Summitt 100% was one. Nick Saban is one. There are just certain people that I don't care what the sport is. I think that person could go coach another sport and still be just as successful, right? Surround themselves with people who may know the X's and O's of cricket or the X's and O's of ice hockey or soccer, and still go out there and still win, motivate people and lead people to win championships. And I think Dawn Staley's one of those people. I think Dawn Staley, could assemble a coaching staff and be a great football coach. I think Dawn Staley could assemble a bunch of, president, vice presidents and such, and be a great CEO of a company. She is just a leader, and those people, it doesn't matter what they're doing, they're going to be successful.
Right.
I just wanted to bring up the girl. I didn't know, you was talking about the blue bloods and stuff. And this year, the men's program, men's basketball, is kind of went the other way. And, you're looking at the Final Four, and it's just, I've etched that game to watch. So I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. And if it's South Carolina and LSU, because Kim Mulkey can coach as well. I mean, that'll be a heck of a national championship game on Sunday for the women.
Oh, yeah. It will be. It's a very interesting Final Four for the women. I think I'm excited about watching the women just as much as the men, maybe just a little bit more this time because of the Alabama. I didn't get there, which I thought they were going to, and you don't have UCLA. You don't have, you know what I mean? Like, there's just some teams that is kind of missing, from the, as a Kentucky fan, we're always looking for those blue bloods. I guess if you're a Bama fan, you're kind of the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's it's going to be April in 2 days, so it's football season down here.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Exactly. So another.
You know how I know that? Because I have a countdown. It's 149 days until week 0.
Okay.
I keep that. That's a running thing on my show every day.
Mhm.
Tomorrow will be 148 days until week 0.
That countdown starts the day that the national championship is done, and then all of a sudden
Absolutely.
they've got the countdown going.
All
and
right.
It is
Yep.
180 days until or
Yep.
whatever it
And-
is, and then
And in fact, I can tell you tomorrow's 108 days until SEC Media Days in Nashville.
Right.
So it is we're a football show and we count down to football season.
That's right.
So basketball was a great distraction, but we're now trying to figure out a quarterback at Alabama.
Right.
Well, speaking of your show, so John sat in with you guys today in studio, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you from College Sportscast for allowing John to kind of sit in and take in your guys' show the next round and maybe learn a little bit of something. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know where we send the bill to babysit him as long as we did today. But we did for 3 hours. Daycare is not cheap, man. So we babysat him for you for 3 hours today. But he came in and he was taking notes. I mean, it really he really reminded me a lot of the TikTok app. I felt like he was stealing our information all day long today.
I was just walking in and just going, yep, taking that idea, taking that idea, taking that one.
If I watch this show in a year and you guys have a lot of our same look, we had to frisk him on his way out. I was afraid that he'd walked out with some cameras and some microphones and stuff.
We're just gonna be like, the round after next. That's our title. We're the round after next.
We worked hard on that name.
It
was really a funny story. Our producer, Sean Henniger, rock star, his wife Nancy is a marketing major, and we sort of surprised our old bosses and we left terrestrial radio, and so we left on July 16th. Was when we walked out the door, and we had a very early meeting, and our target date to go on the air, build a studio, find a place, build a studio, order the equipment, blah, 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 for August the 16th. And in between that, we were going to do some recorded podcasts and video casts for SEC Media Days. But the first live 4-hour show was going to be on August 16th, which was a tremendous amount of work. And while we were doing all this other work and ordering and finding space and this and that, we had to come up with a name of the show because our company would not let us take the round table with us. And so we were coming up with some bad names, and we were just going to be, LTD&B, which was our initials. We were just going to be Dunaway, Brown, and LT, which was bad. I've got a list of some of the bad ones we came up with.
You got the DBL Media Group, right? So
Double Down, which is the name of our media group. So we had launched that first, and that's DBL, Dunaway, Brown, and Lance. DBL, Double Down Media is what that stands for, which was our LLC. But we needed a name for the show. Well, Nancy, Sean's wife, says, "Hey, let me come in and do a pitch to you guys, a presentation." And we were renting out office space and in a conference room. So we were like rolling our eyes, but my God, it's one of our core guys' wife. We got to listen to her. She comes in and, she says, okay, it's five points, 5 sections I'm going to make here. And you could almost hear the whole room roll their eyes at the same time. Like, oh, we thought this would be like 5 minutes. This sounds like it's going to be 50 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it was about 30 minutes. And she goes through the process, and, people are looking at their phones, and she's trying to figure out, trying to teach us about marketing, blah, 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 blah. And we get to the last one, and she goes, okay, the last thing it's called Blowing the Holes in It. I'm going to write a show name up here, and we're just doing this as an example, and I want you to tell me all the things you don't like about it. And she wrote it down, The Next Round. And we were like, okay, that's it. All right, end of the meeting. And she's like, no, that's just an example. Tell me why you don't like it, and then we'll go back and we'll start working on names. And we were like, no, that's it.
You
the
like
next
it.
round. We love it.
Yeah.
We were like, the next round of drinks, next round of drinks, next round of golf, next round of the tournament, survive in advance, the
Right.
next round of boxing. We love it. The next round.
It's
And
the next round of whatever it
it
is of
ended
the
just
stage
like that.
of your
And
show.
she had the logo and everything ready to go, and it all happened like that. So it was a Christmas miracle, if you will, and we accepted it quickly.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. We appreciate you being on with us, Jim. We are going to wrap up our show for the night, but we appreciate you being on with us.
No problem, man. It was a fast 90 minutes.
It was a fast 90 minutes. I agree with that. We will see you guys on Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Time, and we'll do a Final Four show with Steve Heigl.